Hi, my name is Sara. I'm a director at Zaha Hadid Architects and currently based in Hong Kong. I came to Hong Kong in order to lead one of our projects here in Hong Kong, the Henderson. But as a director, I'm involved in all aspects of leading this company. We have been and we thrive to be, and we currently are on the forefront of architecture and design. We seek to push what is possible. We experiment and we want to be the ones trying out new things, developing and pushing the industry forward. In architecture, you have to react to environmental changes and conditions. We've always done this. I mean, architecture at its beginning was there to give you a shelter. Now climate changes and we adapt. But I think ultimately what we need to do is to minimize climate change. So I think we need to go one step further and not only react to the changes we are experiencing, but actually pushing forward an architecture which helps to avoid worsening changes. In Hong Kong, we are this close to the water that, of course, rising sea levels need to be taken into account. Now, what can we do about it here? It's not possible to have flood defenses like we have in London. Of course, you can move to higher ground. Of course, you can start building buildings which take into consideration that there may be floods in the lower levels, like what you see in Miami. But ultimately, you can, of course, manage stormwater drainage to try to avoid floods. But ultimately, we just have to react in terms of increasing flood. What we can do beyond that, I think, is to change the relationship buildings have to the outside by taking the public realm and working with it, by creating green pockets in the city. I do believe that blue and green infrastructure is important for any city. You know, we need to incorporate more green spaces in order to bring down temperatures and improve the air quality, to aid people in the city to live with the environment instead of fighting against it. And I think also blue infrastructure is important because we need to manage extreme rainfalls in a way that flooding, for example, is avoided. If I talk about the interaction between our buildings here in Hong Kong and the public realm, the open spaces, the Henderson is a good example because instead of doing the typical skyscraper comes down to the ground, blocks out the ground and creates this very harsh sort of outside-inside relationship, we lifted the building up, we let the park flow underneath it and the footbridge network. We let, in a way, the public realm flow into the building and seek to open up the relationship between the building and its environment. To create a relationship between the external spaces and the internal spaces and change the perception of people so that the nature is no longer just fought against but worked with. Of course, as an architect, you can push forward sustainable architecture and net zero architecture, which is what we should be doing. But we need more. I mean, in the end, you need a client to support you, and we need a policy change. We need the regulations to help the architects and the client to become better. I think there need to be active policies which allow the developers to, probably for developers and the clients, to incorporate green spaces. There are regulations for this. We have to incorporate certain green areas, but we could increase that. We could actively promote more green spaces and open spaces in the city. Sustainability is something we incorporate in every building by now. I mean, sustainability means, if you break it down, it means first of all we need to optimize the building in order to reduce its energy consumption and its embodied carbon. And then we need to also positively enhance its usage. We need to ensure that, we promote not bringing in your plastic bottle, but we have water fountains. You also educate people with the buildings. For example, we did a project in Iraq, the central bank of Iraq, which is obviously a very extreme climate. So there we did a whole life cycle analysis together with our sustainability engineers, which meant that we not only looked at what materials are we using, are these materials suitable for the climate, can we minimize its carbon, the embodied carbon. We also looked at how is the material, how available is the material? Do I need to bring it from far away and therefore increase the emissions? And so it's a very local approach. It may be that in a certain location steel is better than concrete because it doesn't have to be shipped miles. So it needs to be a holistic assessment. I do hope that Hong Kong takes sustainability much more seriously. The policies are there to support it, and that I think it's generally happening all over the world. People are realizing we need to become better and do more in terms of sustainability. I don't see that Hong Kong will not do that, but I think we need to help and come together in order to do more, basically. I think it is changing. I think in a way you could almost say we go back to where architects started originally, which was to manage sort of everything, right? And then we went to sort of become only the designer. And I think now, because buildings become more and more complex and need to do more and more things, we almost go back to having to manage all these different aspects. It's not only about the shape, it's also about the sustainability, it's about the inclusivity, it's about how this building sits in the city. So in a way, we're going back to becoming a much bigger managerial role, and I think it's good this way. We work much closer now with environmental consultants, with our mechanical and ventilation consultants, because we recognize that those systems make a lot of difference, whether a building has a good footprint or not. And we house so many people that the only way forward is using technology to help us, creating buildings which have less impact and ultimately managing the climate change. I worked in Europe and I worked in the States, and now I'm working in Asia. So if you compare the different landscapes, there is a greater awareness of the urgency of sustainability, especially in the northern countries. If you look at Scandinavia, it's almost unthinkable in Europe or Scandinavia by now to do anything less than triple glazing. I mean, double glazing, but single glazing is an absolute no, which in other places, in the US and sometimes in Asia, is still something which you could consider. I think at the moment still the biggest challenge is that it is frustrating that we could do so much more, and in a way the world still has to catch up to it ultimately. If clients and cities see true immediate value, then it will change way faster.